Yeah, thank you very much, Michael, for a really nice introduction. And that's kind of a capsules kind of talks about what I've kind of been through and how I got here to this place. And yeah, so the whole idea is really thinking about cities in different ways, and because I was a practicing planner at let's see if I can. So the whole idea of using your hands and senses for planning, 'cause I think that's a really important part of what we miss in planning is we don't talk about the senses. So we build all these cities, but they feel kind of half baked, and they're obsolete when the function's gone. We've been following this whole idea about form follows function, but there's no sensory attachment there. So I think that's where things, we have legacy cities now. We have, in fact, I did a workshop in downtown San Francisco Monday, but how to bring people back to downtown San Francisco because nobody wants to be down there anymore because it's not a really inviting place. So how do we change that? So just my background, yeah, I was born and raised in East LA, and my parents, we weren't really. Yeah, I had no blocks. So my grandmother gave me a few boxes of stuff to play with, and that's where it all started. Just like I remember the first time I built this, I don't know, living room out of pieces of aluminum and plastic. I thought, wow, this is incredible. So just that feeling you get when you construct something is really how it always stayed with me. So whenever I do workshops, it's always like, yeah, everybody has that moment again. I'm building something that I can talk about. So I said, but I actually studied interior design, I'm an undergraduate and looked at design, interiors as a way to understand place or understand, this idea. Then after that, I escaped from LA, went to Europe, and I was stationed in Germany for 3 years, in Italy 1 year, and I fell in love with cities because LA was all concrete. It just kind of lacked something. So I went to Europe. I spent 3 years in Heidelberg, and then I went to Italy, and I was thinking, why does Italy feel like East LA? We're out in the streets all the time hanging out, and it feels like I'm back in the block in East LA. So that's where I got the idea about, I think I need to really investigate why this phenomenon happens in East LA. So I came back to MIT and did my thesis on looking at myself in East LA. Why do I connect with it? What's enduring about it? And because if you look at the numbers and stats, it was a place of gangs and not a very positive place. But I thought there's another story to tell that makes it enduring and great, and I want to tell that story. So I started doing my research, and went to. I took 10 rolls of black and white film on the people on the streets, and just started telling the story from all those people on the streets and what they were doing. This is a picture of a woman selling brooms, on the fence, and how she's like the Jane Jacobs of the street. Her eyes are on the street all the time, but it's how they transform spaces. This is like LA is an auto-focused concrete city, but yet a lot of Latinos go there and they walk because they don't have cars, and they start to reimagine these landscapes based on memory. But there is no like code, or there isn't any like Home Depot kit to buy. It's just all done by memory, and to fill the need and aspiration. So, but when you think deeper about it, like for me being half indigenous and half Spanish, we have a really rich kind of blood in us that really kind of gives us a different kind of land use pattern. In fact, I was just telling Michael today is that you think about the 13 colonies in the U.S. and they're all seaport cities. You think about the Spanish Latin American cities, they only had one big port, and that was Havana. The rest are all interior cities. So it's a very different connection, or how they thought about cities being a little different than the American cities being very based on transaction and trade. So yes, so in the U.S., a lot of our policies start from this idea about highest and best use. What's the highest and best use, and that's transactional. So you go to these mill towns, you go to Holyoke, all these little mill towns, you realize that they're obsolete because it was always transactional. And I think while our policies might be transactional, people aren't transactional. People are about relationships. So that's where we have the big schism between how people use space and how we kind of plan for space. They're very different kind of stories that we're telling, and how do we start to bridge that gap? So looking at Latino urbanism, this is an example of walking, right? This is just a Latino woman walking in suburban LA, where it's just a transaction. She wants to get from point A to point B as fast. That's how the engineer designed it. But yet this is a sidewalk in the Mission in San Francisco, where they kind of built, with the storefront, the store owner put mosaics on the sidewalk. And again, now when you walk to the sidewalk, you have a relationship with that sidewalk, with the different kind of physical being and connection to that space. Asphalt versus artwork. So, what connects us to our environments? And this is a picture of a Chicano Park in San Diego, where the city built this freeway right through their neighborhood, and the way the culture pushes back by building murals under the freeway. So now you have people going, 60 miles an hour on top of this freeway, and then you have people lingering below and looking at the artwork. So again, it's a different kind of connection to space and how we understand that. And then the whole idea about, Latinos, coming to the U.S. and really altering landscapes, and the whole idea of like the threshold in the front yards. This is what I looked at, because when I did my research, I noticed there was always front yards in East LA. What does that mean? Does it mean that they're scared people, or they're afraid, or does it mean something different? So I started looking at how they use space, and so what happens is that in the American, landscape, the front door is a threshold between public and private, but then in East LA, it's the front gate. So now people use the front gate as a place of social interaction, and it creates a more vibrant community. And that's kind of a little bit of Italy in East LA. People are in the street hanging out and doing things. So that's kind of what I looked at in my research. So after I did that in 91, I went back to LA and we started working for Metro, building rail lines and working in transportation. And so it was a different way of thinking about space. And I really didn't get a chance to think about, Latino urbanism, and really thinking about how to change urban policies, because people just don't care about this kind of stuff. It's always about the policy, about the money, about the funding, and never about the way people use spaces actually. So I started working at Metro. We have meetings, and we have, on the east side in this big rail project, that we have 50 Latinos in the room, and they would not say a word. They just nod their head. But I just wrote this document, and knew they had ideas about land use and urban design, but they wouldn't say anything. So one day I brought my childhood toys to the meeting, let them all play with it. And after that, they're in. So I started working with artists. I opened up an art gallery in downtown Los Angeles. I started working with artists. I saw how artists can really engage people, through their senses on issues in very creative, kind of positive ways, rather than having meetings that are really negative. So I started bringing my objects to the meeting, and people would just open up and just play with the objects and start to tell their stories. There's a way to get them thinking differently. So so I started doing that, and then I took a class at Art Center on design-based learning with Doreen Nelson, and she was teaching teachers how to teach math and science through building models of cities. And I thought, well, why can't we teach people about city planning by building models of cities? It makes sense, right? So, and that's what I thought. I thought when I was going to MIT, we would be doing this kind of, we would be doing this kind of model building, but MIT was very policy and kind of numbers focused. So I started doing this on my own. And I had the first meeting in 2007 with a group of, with the nonprofit called Taking the Reins. And their mission is to engage Latino youth in, through horse training to have them become more responsible. So the first activity we ever did was, here's a bunch of, these girls had to design a space for them and their horse. And they did with these objects, and it was a really big success because they had all those ideas in them, and they all came out through their fingers. If you talk to them, they probably wouldn't say anything, but building it, they were really successful at building it. So that's why I started developing this idea of the workshop, where we have this that we did today, where you have this 1 hour workshop where people build their icebreaker, the childhood memory, and then they build and they collaborate. So this really changes the planning process. It changes the outcomes. In typical planning meetings, we just talk, it's very talk-based, and people are in survival mode. I want more parking, I want less traffic, I want no density, I want no more housing. That's all they talk about. So, and people that, and you have these people that are kind of the pillars of knowledge that have all that talk a lot, and they're the ones that go out there and just talk for the group. So you get a city like this. That's what people want. You want no traffic and no density. And it's not what people really want, because that's just what they say they want, because that's what they, that's their current need. So for us to really kind of break away from this kind of thinking about survival and parking and no density and and keeping things the way they are, so it's kind of a psychological thing that happens is that because what happens is that our talking brain takes over and we're in survival mode, but then. So it didn't allow our emotions to happen. So I think as children, we're all about emotions. We just kind of move around the world with our emotions, and our parents are kind of our gatekeepers. But when we learn how to talk, we begin to talk about survival. But I think when you remove the talking, you go back to your childhood, and that's what I think is really important. So the objects really activate a different part of your brain. You're thinking about different things because now you're using your hands and touching things. So it really kind of gets people thinking differently. And then like the art making, it's an art making process. Every artist goes to this idea where they have an idea, they go out there and build it, and they reflect on it. So you're giving that power to the people, and people can really kind of start to articulate these kind of sensory details that they're hard to talk about with words, or they don't even know they exist. For instance, this activity, this woman was asked to build how would you improve life in L.A. transportation, and she built this bike path through a forest. She wants to bike through the forest to get to work every day. So that's a way for her to articulate what LA could look like, and kind of her vision of it. And for planners, it's a way for us to understand what are people thinking about the future. Like when I started working in Metro back in 2000, people, engineers thought that biking was for kids. Never going to happen. People aren't going to bike. But yet you have a whole generation, and now bike lanes are popular. So it's kind of thinking about the future, what people want. So yeah, so the activity begins with everybody building their favorite child memory, because I think that's really critical for people to understand planning, because it takes away all the jargon. People don't have to read a map. They don't have to, look at numbers, but they could go back into themselves and think about their first memories or experiences in the world, and that sense of belonging. So a child memory really kind of ties you to a place and helps people understand that planning is about that experience. So I tell people that don't know planning, that's your DNA for planning. You're going to seek that memory all you want, and it works out really well because it breaks down barriers between people. Everybody has memory, and they talk about it, and you can do it in English, or you can do it in Spanish, and or you can even do it with different. Like I do a lot of workshops with the LGBTQ community, where I have them build their first memory being different. They do it, and then people have 30 minutes to 2 minutes talking about their memory and sharing it with everybody else. And then you have all these memories memories have, they start to kind of see the connection. So the story building really helps people rediscover their connection to place and people. The kid, somebody might say, I like smelling flowers, or today somebody talked about building tree houses as a kid, or playing in the forest, or going to their grandma's house. So all these stories, you begin to realize that places have memories and have stories and have attachments to them. So how can we build cities that kind of can be based on these memories and attachments? So we have cities that are not just here for the transaction, but here for the relationship. This is working with African American women, and this woman talking about doing hair with her aunties. How important that was to her, but that puts a value to her story, to that space. So people learn about in these spaces, and it kind of unlocks all the experience that we have, and people realize that they're their own experts in the planning process. And these stories that we carry around in our head, we don't see them, but we see brick and mortar, most planners, and see that's what the city's all about. But yet, each individual fills in that space with all their stories. That's really important for us to really capture these stories and ideas, because, for example, Latino urbanism, all Latinos come from the U.S., buy houses, they change their environment, but it just happens because of these memories they bring with them. So it's really important to understand what people have in their head and kind of unlock it. Yeah, so these stories really help people. So it's just a regular meeting where they can kind of find common themes, collective values, and start really thinking about, how can they build a world together. And you really want to uplift people's experience of storytelling. Not everybody has a story to tell, and you want to uplift that story and put it in the process. And it also creates empathy. Now people's stories become shared and become similar. And now people can connect to each other and say, yeah, I rode a bike too, so did I. And I did a workshop one time in LA where this African built a beach. We played soccer in Africa. This guy in LA built a beach. We played soccer. Two different continents, two different everything, but yet the same experience. So that kind of connects us. And I think that's what we need to make and plan for better cities. So once people, think about that, they can collaborate. They can build their ideal city and community. And you can do a base. Like today in class we built your ideal Mass Ave, here in campus. But you can build a gender-friendly city, bus stop, or equity. And people can collaborate with using their hands. It's really quick and easy, and to vet out ideas. That's really hard with words. With words, doesn't negotiate. But objects, you can move things around and quickly kind of figure out what goes on. This is working in Oakland with women and how to build a safe Oakland at night. They were able to do it. And plus, in collaboration, people realize that I tell people there's no right or wrong answer in planning. It's how we collaborate and share ideas. The guy back in the room in the community meeting had all the answers. That's not planning at all. It's just him kind of, trying to take control. But it's all about collaboration. And people realize that they're stronger together. You share their ideas, you can build them together, you're stronger. And after that, each team presents their ideas, and you talk about what they presented, and now people can share their ideas and figure out, how to move forward. But now you have somewhat of a kind of a design transparency where how ideas get generated. 'Cause a lot of times in meetings, people just say, the urban designer does this, but this time you have the public kind of sharing in the whole design solutions. And then people use models to, so sometimes you'll have people pick a day and time in the future and tell us what you're doing in this model. So this model becomes kind of a living document of their vision for the future, not just this kind of piece of paper. So it's a really good way to get people thinking about, so you just transit was built, there's the elements. Like today, people built a lot of, landscape and passageways over Mass Avenue, but you had a collective sense of what had to be done there. Making it curvy, putting pavers, putting cobblestones. We had all those ideas. Some are easy, some are hard, but now you can start establish collective values. And also importantly, you kind of build relationships with people. Because I think it's important that people have a relationship that's not just a transaction, but now they talk to each other. Because a lot of people don't trust government, but now they trust each other. I think in the long run, they're going to have to. They're in that same boat together. Yes, like any media, you just document, take pictures, and you can make videos, but it's a way to start to influence plans, policies, and projects. So I also do pop-ups. This is what we're going to do today. This is a pop-up of reimagining Mass Avenue and Amherst. Sorry about the typo right there. But yeah, it's done for Mexico. This isn't working in Mexico in the rural area. This is working with the LA Metro, trying to get the mayor and the board of directors figuring out how to replan the future of LA Transit. This is working in Baltimore, built a model of Baltimore. Then I had, people play with it and kind of build their ideal Baltimore. And these pop-ups, you can do them, this is working in Eugene, Oregon. We did it at a Latino market, because the city was interested in how to get Latinos more engaged in park planning. So we did a pop-up at a market, and people just walked in there and built what they wanted to build. This is working in Limerick Park, the African Americans, MLK Day, and just how to reimagine, their community. So these really get people. And what's fun about these is that people just come up to you. What are you doing? Are you selling something? Are you selling perfume bottles? No, it's urban planning. And then people can start to, we have a discussion. So you kind of get people engaged. This is working in, Colton. This is one of our projects. Colton's one of the last. Probably barrios in LA, in Inland Empire. That was an old packing neighborhood. We used to pack citrus fruit, and it's still there, but it's been cut up by freeways and railroad tracks, so it's really hard to get to. But we did a workshop there, and it was really productive. And and also another fun activity to do is take people to parking lots and have them find a spot to like in a parking lot. And you'd be surprised what people find in parking lots. Somebody will say, I found this crack, a piece of grass growing here. I found a cigarette butt. That means this place has history. Somebody's here before me. So it's a really but you realize that people just have different ways of thinking about space. And this is a really good way of doing it. It's really easy to find something that you like there because it's all horrible. This is working in San Francisco, kind of reimagining Columbus Avenue. It has like 20 5-point intersections. You need roundabouts here, like in Massachusetts, the rotary James call them. And also, it's just really a way, for a lot of our clients are women. This is really a really good way for them to express themselves in the built environment, to figure out what works, what doesn't work for them. I hear stories where women will say, with my husband, I walk this way, we walk this way, by myself, I walk that way. Well, why? There's always cues. In fact, working in Oakland, I remember this woman said, if the BART station, rail station, smells like urine, it means the man is drunk, exposing himself, misbehaving, she's out of there. It's just from that smell. So it's all these red flags that really trigger these spaces that we have. This is working with Latino women and having them design their ideal street from scratch. And again, they put in bike lanes, lights, street vendors, all this fun stuff. But it was a really good way to get thinking about it. So it gives people a way to really talk about, their you really kind of visualize their idea. This is working in California, where I asked these women, how would you improve family time? This woman built the border between the U.S. and Mexico, and the popsicle sticks are the border, and the yarns are the flags, and the buttons are traffic. She said people that live in Tijuana, they spend an hour each morning trying to get to work over the border, and there's no, to San Diego, and there's no fast track. But having a fast pass would make them, think differently. But how allows women to think differently about, it allows us to think about the infrastructure in physical form. Also working with women, this is working with women on bike planning. These women wanted to have a restroom in every corner. But how many times do you see restrooms around bike paths, or bike lanes? We don't, so it's really hard to kind of capture that kind of information. And for a lot of youth, it's a really good way to get them empowered, because a lot of youth will build things and tell me afterwards, I had no idea I knew so much about a park until I actually built it. So the word just eliminating, but their senses aren't, and they can build things with these objects. This was working in East LA with Latino students on how to design a light rail station. We took them to light rail stations all over the county, and then we had them come back and build light rail stations for East LA. And this team built it out of candy, and they built a butterscotch railway. But they also talked about architecture. So when you build stuff, you start thinking about, well, how do things feel? So you wanted an architecture that really kind of engaged them in learning. You didn't want billboards. You wanted things that they could look at and think, I can learn from the buildings. That's really important. This is working with the African American youth in Minneapolis, and having to build this, working on the bike rail, the bike plan for the Mississippi River. And these women went out to the community and kind of built and had the model there and got their input from the community members. But they were really confident with this method. They could do this. It wasn't really, it's kind of what they know. And also, I think it's really important for us to really kind of build self-determination within our constituents or community members. This is a workshop I did, I think 6-7 years ago in Phoenix. The city of Phoenix built this really beautiful facility for people with disabilities. It had a swimming pool, basketball court, and all the different things. And right next to it was a rail line, but there was no rail stop. So we did a workshop with this group of people, and we told them all to build their ideal rail station based on your struggle. Build that station. So they did. They shared it, and they were so empowered that for 5 years they lobbied the city to build more station. Now they have a beautiful station that's built there, right next to the facility, and it has all the bells and whistles like shade, water, sound that they asked for. But they were so excited about the station, they just kind of gave them ways to really kind of move forward, because now their ideas became, with that model, became tangible and real. I want this right here. I want this. So now they can move forward with that because there are solutions, and it's a way for them to get them really going and give them a level of independence. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of virtual workshops during COVID, and those are kind of not as fun, but they're interesting because people will build with stuff from their house, and they'll pull out objects that they had for like 20, 30 years. This one woman pulled out a baby blanket. She had when she was 3 years old, and she was a 30-year-old woman, right? A baby blanket that just was important to her. And you realize that people's houses are about these places that these things they're attached to, and that creates their safe space. So how can our cities become these kind of places of attachment? So they kind of hold our memories rather than have them disappear. I think that's the problem, is that we just kind of, we can erase all these memories, but these memories are really important to our urban landscape. This is what people build for their own stuff. This is our book about your dream, play, build, and it's on Island Press. But yeah, it's a way to get people thinking about just having people think about different ways of community engagement, how to get people engaged in this process. So really think about just find your own space in this whole this whole kind of whole endeavor. So any questions or comments? I'm open now.